Hello and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about ENHYPEN TAMED-DASHED, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of the lyrics and the music video to see what they can tell us about the concept and the storyline. Tamed-Dashed is a song that explores the dilemma that the boys are facing after crossing the border and reaching a new dimension. As I explained in detail in my past video, this time around the concept revolves around the inner conflict that arises in the light of their transition. If in reality the boys' debut represented a moment of transformation that gave them access to the new dimension of the music industry, in the storyline this process is symbolized by the boys turning into vampires and facing a new world where everything is strange and confusing. In both cases, this event led ENHYPEN to meet a new side of themselves that they didn't know before, and this new side is constantly tempted by desires that put the boys' values into question. Whether it be their greed to succeed or their thirst for blood, in both situations the boys are facing new cravings that might cloud their judgment. The dilemma of the story is whether to be tamed by these desires and therefore indulge in them, or to dash away in order to escape them, and in Tamed-Dashed this concept is explored in both the lyrics and the music video. Now when it comes to the lyrics, the dilemma that the boys are facing is expressed since the very beginning, because the song opens with Jungwon wondering if they should be tamed by the desires that enchant them. In the lyrics, these cravings are described as dreams that are both beautiful and grotesque, so right off the bat the song references the events that took place back in Border Carnival. Back then, the boys were lured in by a flicker that blinds and deceives that essentially led them to cross the border towards a dream where everything was mixed together. Even if in drunken days the boys initially loved this carnival, the days that intoxicated them also revealed a twisted scene that scared them, so the dilemma that the boys are facing here is whether to give in to this dream or actually run away from it. As Sunghoon tells us, this is a dilemma between dimensions. It's them having to choose whether to stay in this dream and accept all sides of it, or rather go back to normality and follow their original values. And much like what happened in the last album, the boys hate to make this decision because in the middle of it all, they're not even sure who they are in relation to these two worlds. Now in Nicki's lines, this dilemma is also explored by mentioning to be or not to be, which is a famous speech from Shakespeare's Hamlet that ENHYPEN also referenced in Outro Cross the Line. Much like the boys, Hamlet is facing a dilemma in his tragedy. He has to choose whether to be and therefore keep on living, or not to be and cross the border of death. In the story, Hamlet eventually decides to live because he's scared of not knowing what happens after death, but in the outro the boys do the opposite, because even if they share the same doubt, for them crossing this border also overlaps with the beginning of a new life. This is because when they cross the border, the death of the human and the boy eventually leads to the birth of the vampire and the artist, so even if they don't know what days may come after crossing, their initial doubt is overshadowed by their hope that tomorrow might begin like a dream. In Tamed-Dashed, however, Nicki tells us that their dilemma is not resolved the moment they cross the border, because now more than ever they are in the middle of two realities that seem impossible to reconcile. In the song, the solution that they find is eventually to run away and embrace the summer of their life. This is a season that is usually used to symbolize youth, so much like what we see in the video, their initial reaction is to run back to normality and enjoy themselves by playing with each other. As the song foreshadows, however, this is not really the answer, because in the lyrics it's hinted that while the boys might be running away from their desires, they might actually be running in the wrong direction. You see, in the lyrics, the boys tell us that they're following the sun. In their attempt at escaping this twisted dream, the boys use its light as a compass to guide their path, but if we look at this concept in the context of their previous songs, their choice might be actually having the opposite effect. This is because the sun that they are following here is not the same sun that they left in reality, but rather a new type of sun that is now lighting up their new life. Back in Given and Taken, for instance, the boys opened their eyes on day one and the sun burned them and blinded them. Despite of that, however, Sonu told us that they kept going and dived into the red sun to follow their dreams. This is a sun that swallows them. It's a new source of light that the boys find after crossing the border, and in Carnival it was revealed that this new sun is none other than the light that was given to them by the woman in white. If back in drunken days the boys received the flames of a torch that they promised to master, in Fever the boys refer to the woman that seduced them as their sun, so even if in the song they think that they're dashing away from their desires, they're doing so by following the very source of light that tamed them to begin with. Now in the song, this idea is foreshadowed by the way these two sides are actually described, because whether they are tamed or they run, the boys still have to face the very same heat. When they're tamed by desire, for instance, the lyrics tell us that their heart is searing and their thirst is burning. When they dash away instead, they follow the scorching sun, so in both cases the boys are trapped between choices that eventually lead them to the very same outcome. Like it was foreshadowed with Scylla and Charybdis and the choice between the monster and the tornado back in the intro, ENHYPEN are essentially choosing between the lesser of two evils. As they say in the song, their agonizing thoughts are trapped between two horns. If they follow their thirst, then they're tamed by desire, but if they run following the sun, then they're basically dashing back towards the very desire that they're trying to escape, so the only strategy for now is to stick together and keep on running holding each other's hands. This is because, like it's foreshadowed by interlude question, Tamed and Dashed is not really meant to provide a solution, but rather to show us the dilemma that the boys have to confront. Up until now, ENHYPEN crossed the border of their debut and were intoxicated by the chaos of their dream coming to life, so Tamed and Dashed is a follow-up to these events that show us them adapting to this new environment. Even if now their vision is clearer than before, this is a stage that is still full of questions. They're still trying to figure out what to do, who they are, and this leads them to moments of confusion that are more than justified given the situation. Much like what the song tells us, however, this is a struggle that they can overcome by working together, so even if they haven't found the answer just yet, Tamed and Dashed foreshadows that their strength will eventually lie in their unity. Now, when it comes to the music video, this entire idea is actually portrayed in two different ways. The more metaphorical aspect of this inner conflict, for instance, is represented by a rugby concept that spans over two timelines that overlap with one another. The more literal conflict between the boys and their desires, instead, is actually shown with the events that we see in the past timeline, with the boys adapting to their new life as vampires and learning to stand under the sun. Now, to a certain extent, we can say that the rugby concept might be seen as a symbol of them trying to resolve this conflict while the boys are still divided between dimensions. Much like the two sides of a dilemma, the teams who play rugby tussle with each other. They fight, they are in a conflict, and the game doesn't end until one side eventually triumphs over the other. Since in the video we see that this is a game that is played in both timelines, we can say that this is a dilemma that started the moment they crossed the border and continues to this day even after adapting to their new life. Much like any game that is played as a team, moreover, rugby heavily relies on teamwork in order to win, and this is important because, as I mentioned earlier, ENHYPEN are a group that must rely on their unity in order to succeed no matter the timeline that we're talking about. If you look closely, however, in the video the two timelines are not only connected by the game itself, but also by the footballs. In the scene of the beach, for instance, the Jay in the present throws the ball, and the ball leads us to Sonu in the past. At the end, instead, we see that the boys in the present lose the football in the water, but Nikki shows up with the ball that they played with in the past. While the boys in the two timelines don't directly interact with each other, they interact with each other's football, and this is important, especially if we consider that the ball has the shape of an egg. You see, back in Ireland, the egg was a symbol that represented this new group being created and eventually cracking open to reveal their new universe the moment they crossed the border. In real life, the show that the egg symbolized was the medium through which they achieved their transformation into idols, so we can say that in the video, the egg might represent past and present connecting with one another and them slowly adapting to this dream coming true. The past can be seen as the side of the newly transformed boys whose values are being left behind, while the present is the side of ENHYPEN being more comfortable in their abilities and slowly being taken over by their desires. This is a concept that is also conveyed by the way the boys interact with the ball, because if in the past Sonu gets burned when he first tries to reach it, in the present we see Hisung unlocking a new ability and controlling the ball with his mind. This is a great way to show how learning to master their craft actually changes their approach towards the game as a whole. In the past, for instance, the environment itself was a danger that kept them from reaching their full potential. They didn't know how to act because they didn't even know who they were just yet, but now they're in the process of discovering it, and the changes are already pretty evident. Much like what we see in the video, however, the main moment of change actually takes place in the past timeline, because it's in the past that we see actual progress being made. If we compare the beginning and the ending, for instance, the focus of the video is on the Nikki of the past trying to get to the ball and eventually grabbing it. Now, at first glance, this may seem like an insignificant detail to keep in mind, but this is a very important difference because it actually shows us the change that is undergoing after the transformation. You see, the entire premise of the storyline that is shown in the past timeline is that the boys just became vampires and now have to learn to stand under the sun. As it is revealed at the end of the seaside version, this is a side of the story that belongs to Dark Moon, the Blood Altar. This is a title that was recently copyrighted by Hype together with Dark Moon the Grey City, and even if for now we don't know the difference between these two titles, this distinction might actually refer to which of the two worlds the storyline will actually focus on. The Blood Altar might give us more information about the timeline set in the past, while the Grey City might focus more on the timeline set in the present. Up to this point, this is just a guess based on the titles themselves, but this idea might actually be confirmed by both the video and the comeback show, because in both cases the focus is indeed on the past. Now if we take a look at the VCR of the comeback show, we discover that the events that we see in the past timeline actually take place after the boys escaped and the first sun started to rise, shining on everything below. Since in the video we see that the boys already have red eyes, we can assume that in the story ENHYPEN just escaped from the institution where they turned into vampires and are now on the run into the woods. This idea is also reinforced by what we see in Tamed and Dashed, because if you look closely, their clothes are torn and Sano initially burns when he is exposed to the sun. This is a reference to the initial reaction that the boys have before diving into the red sun, and much like what we see in the video, this intense heat brings Sano and the others to hide in the shadow and avoid the sunlight. Later on, however, we also see Sano eventually exposing himself to the light, and this time around we discover that things are different. If at first the sun burned him, now the sun doesn't hurt him at all, and this pushes the others to get rid of their umbrellas as well. Now if we take a look at the VCR, we see that the boys themselves are surprised by this sudden change, because in the narration they tell us that they don't even know why this event is taking place. By their own admission, the light should burn them even if it doesn't, and because of that they think that they were gifted with a new power that they didn't have before. This is a moment of confusion that brings them to start walking the line that will eventually lead them to the present, so these visuals confirm that the boys in the past and the boys in the present are indeed the very same people. This is an idea that is actually confirmed by the video itself, because if you look closely, Nikki is playing with a stick in the same way in different timelines. The people that we see on screen are always the same boys who started their journey in the past and have now arrived in a new world that they don't really recognize. Since in the concept ENHYPEN walked the line but also crossed the line, however, it's also fair to assume that past and present might also be happening at the same time as well. When they cross the border divides two worlds, so even if these two realities are part of the same path, the concept itself suggests that they're kinda living in both at the same time. Whether this is the case or not, however, the video confirms that the boys are given the power to stand under the sun right after they become vampires, and even if we don't know why, what we discussed until now might actually foreshadow the reason. As I mentioned earlier, the boys escape from the searing heart and the burning thirst by following the scorching sun, which is the same source of light that was given to them by the very entity that transformed them. The woman gave them the flames of the torch and she became their sun, so in both the song and the story there is a catch to this new power, because by dashing away they're basically following the very desire that they want to escape. Because of that, the reason why the boys are able to stand under the sun might be because they are unknowingly being tamed by the very power that scares them. As they told us back in Intro the Invitation, ENHYPEN were lured in by a flicker that blinds and deceives, so the woman in white is an entity that is helpful and deceiving at the same time. She can give them power, but she takes something in return, so following this logic, their ability to stand under the sun is something that they have to pay with a price. Much like what they told us in Intro Whiteout, this is a reality where you can take anything but nothing is free, and the most precious things might be the things that you have to give away. In this context, the most precious thing that the boys have is their freedom. As they told us at the beginning, they want to escape from the desires that enchant them, and they do escape, but the price to pay is to be tamed by the very desire that they want to dash away from. As we see in the second VCR of the comeback show, when they become vampires, the boys are both the chasers and the one being chased. They are predators because they are vampires, but there is also something bigger than them that is chasing them in return, so when they cross the border, the desire hits them once again, because they literally follow the direction that they wanted to avoid. As I mentioned earlier, up until now, the dilemma is unresolved. The boys are still stuck between dimensions, they're still trying to figure out who they are, and they still don't know which voice to trust and follow, so for now their solution is to keep on running and holding each other's hands. To know how the situation will unfold, however, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!